Hello, everyone, and welcome to PSL on the Mic, where we break down hot topics important to the residents of Port St. Lucie. I'm your host, Maureen Kenyon. I'm also the city's social media manager. And today in the studio, we are back with Mayor Shannon Martin. Welcome, Mayor.
How are you? Morning.
I'm great. I'm glad you have your coffee with you. You've already refilled it once.
Yep.
That's a good thing. What are we talking about today?
Growth and development, the hot topic of Port St. Lucie that never ends.
You answer questions. I answer questions all the time about it. So I'll just throw it out there. Hopefully we'll do a little tease to get people to keep listening. Can the city control growth?
For the most part, no.
For the most part, no.
Yes.
Okay. So before we get into the discussion, let's talk a little bit about the history of our city. We are fairly young. We're only 62 years old. We are a lot younger than our neighbors to the north and south, Stewart and Fort Pierce. But we've grown exponentially in the past 6 decades. And to understand the city's growth and development, let's talk a little bit about the history, because the history of our city is a little, I don't want to say unconventional, but it has a, what did we say in Denver? We don't have a traditional origin story here.
That's
in
right.
Port St. Lucie. Tell us a little bit about that.
So we were formed as a bedroom community from a development group in 1961. And the way we were formed by platted lots, quarter-acre lots, 80,000 of them.
Wow.
And so what that meant was, by the lots being platted, that came with the inherent right to build a single-family home on that quarter-acre lot without any interference from government whatsoever.
Okay.
And so that was the original city. And we were built, when we were built that way, we were built without water and sewer. We had the county system that we were on. We were built without a lot of infrastructure and roads. We were built without a lot of schools, obviously, and shopping areas, commercial areas, jobs centers, lifestyle centers. And so we've had to retrofit the city for the last 61 years.
Now, the past GDC was General Development Corporation. They actually went bankrupt in the 90s.
They did.
So they kind of left us with all of the things that you're talking about, or without all of the things you're talking about, sidewalks and schools and job centers. So what have we had to do since then to remedy that problem?
Yeah, so first, I just want to share, because not a lot of people know this, we're not the only city that GDC built.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Right.
So what people don't yet know is we're one of 8 other cities that were built by GDC. All have had similar issues over the years.
In Florida?
In Florida.
Which cities?
So Northport, Port
Okay.
St. Joe.
All the ports?
All the cities with a port in the name, and I don't know why, because most of them don't have ports. They were all GDC communities.
Okay.
So, but yes, as time has gone on, we've had to develop our city into the city that we want to be and the city that we were actually planned for. Because if you think about it, we were planned with those 80,000 lots. So if you multiply that alone times 2.5 people per household, right, you're well over 160,000 people. And so then 30 years ago, St. Lucie West was annexed into the city. Mm-hmm. And so then 20 years ago, the Southwest annexation area was annexed into the city with thousands of acres.
And that would be Tradition?
The entire Tradition
Okay.
area from Crosstown Parkway all the way down to Becker Road.
Okay.
And so, and we call that, since most of it's Tradition, but part of it's not, we call it the Southwest annexation area.
Okay.
So as it stands right now, between the old, I'll call it the old city or the original city, and our annexation areas that we were allowed in 20 and 30 years ago. So between the infill, I'll call them the infill lots in the original city, and then what's entitled development-wise in the Southwest annexation area, we have 55,000 residential entitled units still to be built in the city of Port St. Lucie.
That's the 80,000. There's still 55,000?
So 80,000 was the original city. And then when we annexed in the 30,
So all the other-
30 years ago, the St. Lucie West and then the Southwest
Southwest.
annexation, that added more entitlements for residential development. Now, that's mixed. It's going to be apartments. It'll be, townhomes and single-family homes in the Southwest Annexation area. But if you add what's still entitled and combined all together, there are still 55,000 residential units entitled in the city of Port St. Lucie. And we cannot take away those rights as a government.
Okay.
So that's why I say, for the most part, no. How we manage growth in terms of what we can allow and not allow is through our comp plan and our zoning laws.
So we get this question a lot. I see this question all the time. That people are there's a house being built on Port St. Lucie Boulevard, or there's a house being built on Becker. We can't stop that. If Grandpa Joe in 1970 bought that plat of land and his, grandchildren they inherited it from their grandfather, they have the right to build there.
That's right, because it's zoned residential. It's
Okay.
zoned single-family residential. So unless the property owner wants to change the zoning and/or the city has a need for it where we would potentially do what's called eminent domain or a taking, the only way the city can do that is if the city needs a plot of land for a special public purpose.
Okay.
So if we need land to build a road. So years and years ago, when Becker Road was going to be built, the city embarked on eminent domain proceedings and asked for people's land offered to purchase in order to build Becker Road, and that was done. And as a result, the city still has several parcels of land along Becker Road.
The city owned that we
That we
have.
own, that the
Okay.
city owns. Instead of putting those back on the market, we decided as a council policy that we were going to keep them because we have so much growth as it is, and we're going to keep them for potential pocket parks to be developed
idea.
in the future in certain areas, depending where it is along the Becker Road corridor. So
Okay.
that's how we really, like I said, we really cannot take property unless there's a special public purpose. And so a lot of people say, why doesn't the city just buy it? Right? Well, we're not just going to buy land just to buy land. There has to be a reason that we need it.
Right, because it will just sit there.
Right. It's taxpayer money that we're spending, so we have to make sure that we're utilizing it for a specific need that's going to benefit the majority of the residents of the city.
Okay. And as far as infrastructure, we were really not left when this all happened. They went back into the 90s, and we didn't have the infrastructure for sidewalks in schools. Let's talk about our master plans that we have for all this and what the city's been doing.
Yeah, so we have master plans for almost everything you could possibly think of. We have a 10-year sidewalk master plan. And the idea for the master plan for the sidewalks was that we knew that we were not built with sidewalks. And it is an issue, especially connecting schools and making sure pedestrians are safe. So we wanted to make sure that in a 10-year time period, we would have a sidewalk on every major collector and arterial roadway, and especially as it relates to connecting to schools.
Okay.
And so we are well on our way with that, luckily. And between all of our funding opportunities, between city funding, between our sales tax funding that we get, between grants that we get with the state, we will definitely have all of those sidewalks in the public roadways and areas by 2028.
And everybody can look at those sidewalk master plans too at cityofpsl.com/sidewalks.
Yes.
Like I said in previous podcasts, we have short URLs for everything. Our webmaster does a great job of that. Now, we get a lot of questions too. Housing is a smaller part of those questions, but a lot of it has to do with the mixed use and the business side of it. Like, why do we have so many storage facilities? Why are there so many car washes? Is there an explanation? Can you explain that? Why there seem to be like lots of strip malls that right now seem to be unoccupied, but I think they're going to have some people in them soon.
Sure.
Talk about that a little bit.
So again, it goes back to our comprehensive plan. So if you're a property owner and you own, whether you're a single person or an entity, you have property rights. And our comprehensive plan is our guiding document that says how the city should be developed. And the comprehensive plan is amended every 5 years because you have to keep up with the times and be adaptable. But in the comp plan is your land use and your zoning. So your land use and your zoning have to match. So if you have a parcel of land that you want to be commercial, then you have to come into planning and zoning. You have to go through all our processes of review to make sure that your land use and your zoning match, number one. There's concurrency, meaning they take a look at the traffic patterns. They took a look at, is there water and sewer to the property? How is it going to affect, how many peak trips are going to be affected, and it's going to add to the roadway. Depending on what it is, where is it close to? Are you close to schools? So a complete comprehensive review is done by our planning team, and then the project will go forward to planning and zoning. And depending on the size of it, then it will also come through to city council. But it's important to note that, and this came up yesterday actually in our planning and zoning board of appeals meeting. The city does not choose brands. The city does not say, okay, well, we already have 5 Burger Kings in the city, or 5 storage facilities in the city, or 5 nail salons in the city. We don't look at that. We look at, does the use conform and match to the criteria in our comp plan and our zoning laws?
And that's the thing, you follow the comp plan.
That's right.
Right.
And we have to follow that criteria, and that criteria is set by state law. We do have leeway as a council, and what we typically look at are, where are the access points? Is there a turn lane that provides for mobility and not backups on the street? How are the cars stacking? If it's a school, making sure that the public roadway isn't impacted negatively, and making sure that they're stacking in the parking lot area or on the school property to make sure that they're not going off into the road and causing major traffic problems. Same thing with fast food restaurants, making sure that stacking isn't coming out. And so we look really closely at all of those plans and discuss them at our public meetings to make sure that wherever the use is, that it fits the area and it fits our criteria.
And it's being used properly in the way that
It's being planned properly, yep. We make sure that the proper landscaping is in place, we're safe, clean, and beautiful. It's something that's really important. So we take a look very comprehensively at all of that in order to make those determinations.
I wanted to go over some of the, there was another presentation yesterday during special city council meeting, results from the community identity survey that we had sent out to residents and even non-residents. And some of the challenges that people answer, I believe most of it was multiple choice. They could add what they wanted to. Challenges are our infrastructure, quicker than anticipated growth. I wanted to go over the quicker than anticipated growth.
Yep.
Why do you think, as our mayor and previous council members, everyone, why do you guys think people want to come to Port St. Lucie?
Well,
And it's mostly from other cities in Florida. We have our northern residents who are, our winter residents.
Sure.
But people are moving here in droves. Why do they want to come here?
Well, we are known to be safe, clean, and beautiful. We pride ourselves on that. Safety is something that is top priority. Cleanliness and beautiful is also top priority, and we've been known to be that. And that's something, like I said, we pride ourselves on, and we're going to continue to follow through on. There's that question of affordability, right? And so some will say, well, we're not affordable anymore. Some say we are. We are still affordable compared to other markets, especially South Florida. And what we've seen is a mix of people coming up from down south because the affordability factor is pretty much non-existent down there. And then we see people coming from other states. And so we have this mix. We're always been a melting pot. We're always going to be that melting pot. And COVID has flocked many more people to the state of Florida. We're not the only ones faced with this situation. Many Florida cities are seeing exponential growth.
Because of COVID.
Because of COVID, but also because of the economy, because of high taxes in other states.
True.
Political issues, as we know, definitely affect people's decisions. And so like I said, we're not the only city that's faced with this. Other cities are too. Fort Lauderdale, for example, if you look at what they're doing, they're getting so many people, and their city government organization they're building an entire new city hall because they cannot, their old city hall is no longer sustainable for them because they have to hire more employees to service their residents.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, if you look at our city hall, we're busted at the seams here, and
We
we've
are.
had active conversations about how we're going to address that. As far as infrastructure goes, I understand everyone's concerns and challenges about the traffic, but if you look around the city, there are so many road projects going on. And that is because a lot of the projects with the funding that became available, whether it's city funding or state funding, all the funding kind of happened at one time. Mm-hmm. And while it has been painful and stressful to deal with traffic and then construction, we all have to remember that it's for a shorter period of time and that the benefit is to make sure that there's mobility on the roadways. And to that point also, we embarked on our mobility plan, which is so important because as you see the construction projects, Floresta, PSL Boulevard South, the interchanges getting their improvements by the state, we also have a plan for what roads we're going to tackle next. And how we're going to pay for them is through our mobility fees, which are paid for by development. So it's an impact fee, but we call it a mobility fee because it's more flexible to use as a mobility fee than an impact fee. And you're going to see their next step is going to be St. Lucie West Boulevard. We've been talking about Torino next because Torino, we're going to build a regional park.
Yep.
You got to make sure the road can handle people going to this regional park. Because Torino Park has been promised for 20 years now.
It
and
has,
we're finally getting to the point where we can get it moving.
And we're going to have Kelly Boatwright in here in the next couple weeks to talk about, there's
Yeah.
a meeting on Thursday,
Right.
actually, August 24th, that people will have the results of some of the survey from that.
Right. So all of these things are being planned right now. What a lot of people don't understand is that when it comes to designing a road and planning for a road, there's phases involved. And first you have to determine there's a need. Then you have to say, okay, let's go to design. Design could take 1 to 3 years sometimes, depending on what that widening or what that road needs in order to be developed properly or add more capacity.
And is that just the design on paper?
That's just the design on paper.
Okay.
That doesn't even
The construction of it
Yeah.
hasn't even started yet.
Because we have to follow state law, we have to go, once the design is done, we have to go through the RFP or request for proposal process and put it out to public bid. And then depending on what the design looks like and the engineers take a look at it, roads can take 2 to 4 years to build, sometimes more. But we are actively working on all of our major roads, and we are working on in different phases to make sure that we are addressing and adding infrastructure. We're also doing short-term improvements, like adding turn lanes in certain intersections. So at the Gatlin-Savona
I was going to say, which
intersection.
intersection? Yeah.
Yeah, so Gatlin-Savona, we're going to see improvements there, adding turn lanes. Instead of having four-way stops, we're looking at putting roundabouts in certain places. And I know some people hate them, some people love them, right?
Yeah.
But the reality is, people have said in our surveys they want to make sure that they can get through the city and have mobility. And so that is a way to make sure cars are constantly moving or people are moving out throughout the city. So all these plans are being worked on simultaneously.
And personally, I love the roundabout. I live in South Bend, and that roundabout there, I believe ours is just a 1-lane roundabout, which they're a little bit easier to navigate, I think, than the 2-lane roundabouts. But, you know, we see people all the time praising the city for putting in roundabouts, and then there are those who would rather have a 4-way stop, but that actually stops traffic, and then people don't know who goes next, and it's a thing. So I'm happy we have the roundabouts here.
Yeah, I like them too.
Yeah. Animals and wildlife. That's another question that we get. And at cityofpsl.com/wildlife, again, all this will be in the description for you guys. We have, say the gopher tortoise. It's a protected animal, and same with the sandhill cranes. And we have regulations and developers, and everybody has to go through this same process to make sure they're relocated properly. Can you discuss that a little bit? Because people are worried. They worry about the wildlife. I see a bobcat. I see, a fox or something. I don't know. There's probably no Florida panthers around here, but they're getting displaced.
Sure. And, I'm an animal lover, a huge animal lover. And the gopher tortoises are protected by the state. and all of the endangered species are state regulated. The city doesn't really have any control over those state regulations, but what we do is make sure that the regulations are being followed through development that does occur. And so if there are gopher tortoises found on a property, the developer is required to mitigate for those gopher tortoises and make sure that they are captured and moved to a different area. Sometimes does it happen where you have some maybe smaller developers not follow the rules? Sure. But what we do is then we go out, we get complaints, our building department will go out, we'll take a look at it and inspect it, and then we'll address it and make sure that they're following state guidelines and state rules. If anyone ever sees issues with regard to that, you can call, there's a state hotline through Florida Fish and Wildlife, and somebody in Florida Fish and Wildlife officer will come out and inspect and check to make sure. And it is sad that they do get displaced, but the great thing about nature is that animals do find their way.
And we can live among them
And we
in
live
a safe
among
way.
them, yep. And so while we can't stop people from, building on their quarter-acre lots, those things are in place, and we, to the best of our ability, we try to make sure that we're addressing any issues that come up. Now, what's sad is a lot of it is, especially with our beautiful sandhill cranes, a lot of it is about human behavior.
100%.
And it's so sad because the hardest thing to regulate in life is human behavior. And so if you see cranes, I've gotten out of my car, stopped traffic, put my hands out and saying, hey, nobody better move. Same thing with tortoises, because I don't want to see those animals injured. And it's all about really just respecting the animals, taking time. You see them, slow down, make sure that they can have their way, because it is their habitat too. But unfortunately, we can't. We are not a wildlife sanctuary. The city isn't, and that might be hard for people to understand. The quarter-acre lots are not, for wildlife. They're overgrown lots, and people have the right to develop on them. But to that point, we do have a land preservation plan in place. We're actively working on it. I kind of mentioned before about the properties on Becker Road. So we're keeping them because we want them to be more nature oriented. There are other areas in the city that the city owns where we'll be working on that. And then all of our parks that are becoming online, we want to make sure that there are natural areas, so there will be some type of habitats, not specifically for animals, but just to make sure that they do have a place to roam and live freely. Because people like the nature areas too.
Of
and
course.
that's become more and more prevalent that people want us to keep it more nature oriented. So we're trying to do that.
And yesterday when I was going over those survey results I mentioned from our community identity survey, that was another positive, was that people loved that we have lots of nature here, which you think, we're growing, we're a big city now. We're not that bedroom community. But it's good to see that we are doing things like this to make sure that we still have the nature among the houses and the businesses that we have here in the city. I want you to just go over, we've annexed like 27,000 acres. You mentioned that earlier, but can you just talk a little bit about how that has actually, we have more houses and land area now in the city, but how that actually helped with our growth a little bit
In terms,
by annexing all of that land.
in terms of revenue, or what do you mean?
Sure.
How does it-
Yeah.
So, well, obviously there is, whenever there are more homes, there are impact fees, and then obviously with property taxes, the city has more revenue. And to be honest with you, it is needed because the service is increased. Growth never pays for itself, though. I want everyone to understand that.
Yeah.
And I spent a lot of time just even last night explaining it when people were talking about getting their trim notices. So let me give you an example how growth does not pay for itself. You have 22,000 people that have moved to the city of Port St. Lucie in the last 2 years. The city is already, when it comes to public safety, that's our top priority, right? But we are down police officers. We're down police officers for a variety of reasons. People retiring out, with the way things are in the economy, and political aspects. It's hard to get police officers today, but we pride ourselves on being a premier agency, making sure we get the best of the best. So if you want to keep the city safe, the safest city, you have to make sure you have the right amount of police officers to serve the population. And so they're not cheap, right? Most of our budget is staffing,
Yep.
is for paying for personnel to do the jobs. We're not corporations. We don't have widgets. We don't make profits. We provide service. That's what we do. So if you look at how we collect our impact fees, there's a law enforcement impact fee that we collect for every home that is built in the city of Port St. Lucie. That law enforcement impact fee is $421 per house. One bulletproof vest for an officer costs us $1,000.
Wow.
And that bulletproof vest is only good for 5 years because the Kevlar
Sure.
expires. So it takes more than 2 houses to be built just to pay for one bulletproof vest for an officer. And that doesn't include all the rest of the equipment. That doesn't include their police car. So think about it.
I don't think people can argue with that.
Right. So, and I try to break it down in that way because it's kind of easy to understand it that way. Because, government accounting and budgeting and everything is so complex.
Oh, yes.
But it's just one example of how growth doesn't pay for itself. And how we had another podcast where we talked about the tax tool, right? And it's so important to take a look at that too online, because if you put in the numbers that go to the city, the taxes that go to the city, and you break that down, and if you relate it, just take the PD, for example, the police department. If you put in the number that you pay to the city and you see what portion goes to the police department, it's alone. Forget about everything else, all the other services. You can see just how little it is for every household, but yet we still have to pay for not just the PD, but we have to pay for everybody.
All of it, right.
Right.
All of the services we provide.
Right. And so while we have a $700 million plus dollar budget, we're at $724 million roughly now. Our general fund is like a quarter of that. So, and the police department takes up 65% of that general fund. So just to put it out there as a really good example that we have to keep paying for services. We have to make sure that we have enough for the people that are moving here, and we can't stop it. So we have to balance it out very closely and still try to provide some relief to our citizens by lowering that millage rate as much as we possibly can every single year.
What is the number one thing you want residents to know about growth? What is the most important thing for them to maybe understand and in the long run here?
That while we can't stop it, the council, the city administration, our entire city team is working diligently to address all of our infrastructure issues, whether it be roads, whether it be water and sewer, septic to sewer, parks, making sure we have enough parks. We really look at every single plan. Our entire team works hard on our strategic plan to make sure that we are addressing all these needs. The issue is always going to be funding, but know that we're always going to be making sure we're leveraging all of our resources in order to get as much funding as we possibly can to pay for all our needs coming in the future, now and in the future. So, and then communicating that is so important, and that's why we have the best team in the world in communications. Got to give everyone a plug in communications. Because,
We try.
No, amazing job. But we are working on everything, and if anyone ever has any questions, you can email me, you could call me, and I will spend hours and hours and hours talking about the city and everything that's going on, because I love it. I love talking about it, and it's really important to make sure people have accurate and factual information about what's going on.
Yes, ma'am. I woke up this morning preparing for the podcast, and I was, of course, on Facebook because, that's kind of what I do.
Yep.
And I noticed all of these answers from Shannon Martin on these Port St. Lucie, not associated with the city,
Right.
but Port St. Lucie related Facebook groups at, midnight, I think it was. Yeah. And I laugh, but you went through, I believe we're gonna talk about that a little bit, because we did have a podcast about taxes and property taxes and trim notices, but they did get mailed out. I got mine yesterday. Mine went up a little bit, and not as much as I thought. But you were answering questions about trim notices at around midnight last night, and just thorough answers, and people thanked you. I don't know if you saw those yet, but thank you for explaining it so easily for us and breaking it down, kind of like what you just did with, police and the vests. Yeah, she's out there, you guys. The mayor is out there on social media, whether she wants to or not. But when you hear it, like, from the proverbial horse's mouth, you know what you're talking about. You're the voice of the city. It's great to see you out there on social media.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the trim notices, though. I know this has really nothing to do with growth. Maybe it does have a little bit to do with growth, but they did get mailed out. And let's just talk a little bit about what people might be expecting when they open that envelope.
Yeah, so it definitely has to do with growth, because the more people come, it does affect property values. And we have seen substantial growth in our property values over the last several years. And so it's so funny, because people don't seem to, and which I find interesting, is I would think that everyone would want their property values to increase, right? Now, you may not sell your house, you may not want to sell your house, but it is important.
You might not be able to sell your house right now.
But it is important for a community to have higher property values, right? You want the value of the most important asset that you own, that you live in, to have a higher value. However, that does translate to higher taxes. And so while the city has consistently lowered the millage rate, and we did it again, a 1/10 of a mil this year.
Thank you.
The tax rate. So the millage rate and the tax rate are the same, but they're used interchangeably. If you're homesteaded here and the property value is higher from last year, you're capped at 3%. So you are going to see a little bit of an increase on your trim notice. Now, someone yesterday put a post that said, my taxes went up $300 a year, right?
I wish mine did.
And I was like, your taxes went up $300 a year? I find that hard to believe. Your property value definitely went up.
Yeah.
But your taxes, there's no way your taxes could have gone up unless you just bought your home. But this person, I don't know the person personally, but I know that this person's been around a long time. Mm-hmm. So since everything's public record, I immediately went on to the property appraiser's website, and I looked at his trim notice, and I noticed that the reason why he thought his property taxes went up $300 is because he was looking at the wrong column. And he was comparing the wrong columns.
Was he looking at the pink column?
He was looking at the pink column.
Don't look at the pink column.
And I despise the pink column. And the reason why is because the pink column represents something that cities, I haven't seen a city do it. We haven't done it. The pink column represents what's called the rollback rate. And the state of Florida.
What is that?
The rollback rate is the rate that the amount of money that the city would collect if the budget didn't change from year to year.
Okay.
Well, I've never heard of a city budget or anyone's budget that doesn't change from year to year. But it is a state law that that column has to be in there, and it has to be explained. So just for anyone out there, just ignore the pink column. Pretend it doesn't exist. White it out on your trim notice if you have to. But the orange column or yellowish column, that's what you paid last year. The green is the tentative amount, and that is the column that shows all of the rates, represents all of the rates that the taxing authorities have reported to the property appraiser that they are planning to charge when they have their budget hearings in September. So if you look at our city's rates, that's what the city council agreed to at our August 1st workshop, or first week of August workshop. And that's the notice to the public. That's how much we're going to charge our tax rate and the equivalent or corresponding dollar amount based on the assessed property value. And so, again, don't pay attention to the pink. Just ignore it, act like it's not there, and then you can get a real true. If you subtract the green from the orange, you'll see the true increase in your ad valorem portion of your bill. the bottom notice or your trim notice. The bottom is the non-ad valorem, and again, that's for your stormwater fee, that's for your solid waste fee.
Those special assessments.
Yes, and so, yes, again, your special assessments have gone up. Stormwater is $10 this year to deal with our $240 million stormwater master plan that we have to make sure that we are, because of the growth, we are doing projects to maintain our stormwater system, to make sure we don't have flooding and to address our drainage. And then, of course, our solid waste fee has gone up again because we have the 4% consumer price index increase that's built into the contract, and that one-time credit has gone away.
Gone, right.
So that's a difference of $53.22. So if you add the $53.22, your $10 from your stormwater, which is, again, the non-ad valorem assessments, to the difference between the green column and the yellow or orangey column, that's going to be what your total increase is.
That'd be the increase mostly, yeah.
Right, if you add the two together. So,
Okay, I'm glad you went over that.
Yep.
That was the first thing I noticed when I woke up this morning, was that you were answering questions about the trim notices, and I didn't check my mail until
yeah.
this morning.
I grabbed mine yesterday.
It was there. Yep.
I did the math on mine. Typically around this time of year, I do that for many people. So if anyone has any questions, if you don't understand it, because it is confusing.
It is.
Please just let me know, and I'll help you figure it out. More than happy.
We also we did an entire podcast
Yep.
on taxes,
We
which
did.
I really recommend that everyone listen to. Again, cityofpsl.com/podcast, Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts. We're also on YouTube. You can watch us there.
Yeah.
So before we go, I wanted to bring up one other thing. I noticed also the community identity survey results. We're going through a new branding. We're going to have a new website design
Yep.
starting in the beginning of the year as well. A lot of people were very positive and very excited about the diversity and the inclusion that the city of Port St. Lucie, we're just a very open city, and we love that part of it. We're having, and because of that, residents have been asking for a while now through even the Citizen Summit surveys that we do yearly, and the National Community Survey, lots of surveys, but it's you guys that are answering these questions, our residents that are answering these questions, and we're coming through with them. We're having the inaugural Port St. Lucie International Fest in the middle of September. And it's going to be a lot of fun. It's at Mid-Florida Event Center, like I said, Saturday, September 16th, I believe from 2 to 9. And do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I know you're super excited about it.
I am. That's one of the things, like you said, that came out of the surveys. We need more culture, and we need more fun things to do, and make sure that we're addressing our diversity. And so being a fully integrated city, that's something that's so important to all of us on the city council and our entire community. So we're going to bring everyone together. We're going to have an international festival, and there's going to be different types of food from different cultures, entertainment. I think there's
There's a Grammy winner, Tomasito
Yep,
Cruz
we have a Grammy
will
winner.
close the day out. I believe we have lion dances,
from Chinese.
Chinese lion dances, drummers. I'm not sure which country. We're having Palm Beach pipes and drums, I think, from Ireland, and tons of different food from different countries.
Right.
Jamaica, Korea, Japan. Gosh, there's a ton. There's a Facebook event out there right now. You can also visit cityofpsl.com. Actually, wait, it's pslparks.com. That has all the information there for the International Fest. Again, it's September 16th at the Mid-Florida Event Center. And there's also something going on too, Arts and Ideas, where if it's too warm outside, which it will probably be too warm outside, hang outside for a bit, and you can go inside the Mid-Florida Event Center and answer more survey questions about the city of Port St. Lucie, what you'd like to see here. But we're also going to have garments from different countries as well, kind of like a fashion show going on inside that the communications department and our Fry committee have been working on for the past couple weeks now, months actually. So
Right.
we hope everybody comes out for that September 16th. Anything you want to close out with, Mayor, before we end today's episode?
Sure. Like I said, our arts and culture and diversity is so important, and inclusion in our community. And so if we're not doing something that our citizens want, then hey, tell us. If there's another city that you've been to and they've had something really cool and interesting as an event, let us know what it is. And we are very open to new ideas. We often joke, elected officials often joke when we go to our Florida League of Cities or National League of Cities, or if when I go to U.S. Conference of Mayors, we steal ideas from each other. And that's one way that stealing is okay, because we all want to build on what other cities have and to make our cities better. And so whatever way we can do that for our citizens, we want to make sure that happens. You know, we have very high public engagement, something that's really important. And that's exactly why we're having our international festivals, because of our residents said
They wanted it.
They want it. So we do what you want as best we possibly can and try to make things happen. And so let us know. And we hope everyone enjoys it, because I'm looking forward to being there and seeing how great it's going to be.
I am too. It's going to be a really good time.
Yeah.
Mayor, thanks so much. We're going to have you back, I think, soon to talk about an update on some major road projects that are going on in the city. So we
Yeah.
look forward to that. But thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely.
We'll talk to you
Happy
guys
to be
soon.
here.